Hi, I'm Helena Solo-Gabriele. I'm a professor of civil, architectural, and environmental engineering at the University of Miami. I'm also the Associate Dean for Research. In my research, I tend to focus on problems that combine knowledge of the environment and human health. Through the Hinkley Center, I was very fortunate to have been funded on a project called CCA Treated Wood. The focus of this project was to evaluate the wood preservative chromated copper arsenate. As a result, this wood preservative helps to maintain the integrity of the wood to prevent biological deterioration when it's used outdoors. However, because of the chemicals that are added to the wood, it increases the levels of arsenic, chromium, and copper, such that when it gets disposed, there are concerns about the exposure of people to the chemicals, in particular arsenic. On this research, I worked for many years with a colleague from the University of Florida, Dr. Timothy Townsend. In addition to Dr. Timothy Townsend, we received considerable support through John Schert and also Bill Hinkley of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. In this journey, we looked at what happens to the wood while it's in service and also during its disposal. Bill Hinkley was particularly passionate about the disposal issues because of potential contamination to groundwater systems in the state of Florida. We were very fortunate to work on the CCA Treated Wood project between the late 90s and through the middle 2000s. In the middle 2000s, CCA Treated Wood was phased out from residential applications due to concerns associated with exposures and also public perception issues. So at that point in time, because of the phase out from residential applications, in addition to reducing exposures during residential use, there was also a decrease in the amount of CCA treated wood disposed. We were very fortunate that recently, in the year 2014 through the year 2017, we received another grant from the Hinkley Center to revisit the disposal issues associated with treated wood. In this case, in more recent research, we are finding that there's a greater proportion of copper-treated wood as opposed to arsenic-treated wood because of the changes in the residential uses. We're very fortunate that we were able to do this research to follow up after a decade of looking at it intensely through the Hinkley Center. We were recently funded through the Hinkley Center to look at a new chemical contaminant. This new chemical contaminant is a sequence of many different, about 3,000 different chemical compounds that are very resistant to degradation in the environment. They're called per- and polyfluorinated alkyl substances. These compounds are found throughout the world. They're found in over 99% of Americans, in the blood of Americans, and there is concern about the human health impacts that this compound can have in the environment. Through the Hinkley Center, what we are looking at with respect to PFAS is to understand how much of the PFAS is out there through the solid waste stream, in particular in landfill leachate. And we're also looking at leachate treatment technologies as a way of taking PFAS out of the environment. My research area of study is important because it combines what we know about the environment to understand how people would react to it, what type of illnesses they may get from exposure to these chemicals. And the Hinkley Center projects, including the one with treated wood and also the PFAS, address this issue. With respect to the treated wood project, arsenic is a chemical compound that is very toxic to humans and causes health effects, and it's important to understand how the chemicals released in the environment during disposal so we can better predict what the impacts can be to the human populations. Similarly, with PFAS, again, PFASs are linked to human health impacts, and knowing how much goes out into the environment through landfill leachate is important to know to be able to contain it and to treat it so that it's taken out of the system. Well, the CCA Treated Wood really started with a visit from John Schert to the University of Miami back in 1995 or 1996. He was looking for researchers to apply to research grants. I had never heard of the Hinkley Center at that time, and on the RFA, I had never really done solid waste research from the point of view of actual research. I had done some consulting work in solid waste. And so I looked at the RFA, and there was this chromated copper arsenate project on there that just caught my attention because when I did my Ph.D., I looked at fate and transport of those same metals in my Ph.D., but in rivers. And I had never looked at it in wood, but I just thought it was interesting because I'm very familiar with the metals and I wanted to look at it further. So I just went ahead and applied, and I got it. And the first time I applied, and was subsequently funded for 10 years after that. To study the PFAS topic, that really was motivated through my Ph.D. student who is currently working on the project. She's very passionate about the study. She studied the area, the contaminant in her hometown, and now had the opportunity through the Hinkley Center to study it here. In addition to that, my colleague Thabit Tolomat of the EPA also recommended that PFAS is an important topic area. And so we went and started looking into it and became very interested. The more we learned about it, the more interested we became in it. The Hinkley Center was the first center that funded research specifically that I know of in solid and hazardous waste. It's a center that looks at solid and hazardous waste from a very practical standpoint as far as application. And so because of the emphasis on the application, including people from the TAG, from the industry, the researchers are expected to look at very practical problems. There's no other agency out there, no other center out there that has this type of emphasis and focus. For example, the National Science Foundation very rarely will fund research in solid and hazardous waste, but if they do fund it, it's more from a theoretical chemistry point of view as opposed from a more practical standpoint. And the Hinkley Center is very unique in that realm in terms of funding very practical-oriented solid waste research. The whole science aspect about the inclusion of CCA in products that are recycled from C&D was very exciting and very interesting. But in this whole journey, what I found so fascinating and interesting is interacting with people, understanding how policy is made, learning more about how the EPA functions and how the industry integrates with the regulatory agencies, and just it was massively eye-opening. Learning more about how the government operates, how the industry operates, and trying to get your research to be considered within their operations. The importance of the partnership is the fact that we're universities, we're educational institutions, we're research institutions, so we have a dual responsibility of not only creating new knowledge, but also educating the next generation. So our students are critical to that particular partnership so that they can carry on and proceed with what they've learned through the research. The partnership with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection gives it a very practical standpoint from the point of view of they have a problem that needs to be resolved. They need information to make decisions on regulations and policy. And our research becomes very relevant in that context because it's being used. It's being used to make decisions in the state of Florida. And so that partnership has been extraordinarily valuable. And the Hinkley Center is the glue that keeps it all together. They are the funding agency which looks at the research and the quality of the research, the accomplishments in terms of education, and ranks proposals. They also take information from the Florida DEP to understand what it is that is needed on the regulatory end to then come up with a program that is beneficial overall. The Hinkley Center is extraordinarily important to me. When I first started as a professor, an assistant professor, I believe they were one of my first grants. And so without the Hinkley Center, I wouldn't be where I am today as a full professor at the university, much less associate dean for research. And so they gave me the opportunity early on. And so I'm very grateful and thankful for that. I'm also very grateful to John Schert, to Tim Townsend, to my collaborator at University of Florida, and also especially to Bill Hinkley. He was so passionate about the research that we were doing, and he would really help us considerably. I remember when we went to Minnesota, where they were arguing the CCA treated wood. In Minnesota, they had some very strict regulations on the disposal of treated wood. And we went up to Minnesota, and he was a huge proponent. We had industry there and saying certain things that weren't true, and he became very passionate about the whole treated wood issue and the fact that it needed to be addressed. And so I'm very grateful to the center, to my collaborator, and also to Bill Hinkley for taking me under their wing way back in the beginning and actually taking this journey with me through CCA treated wood issues. So I guess in summary, what I really want to say is thank you. Thank you, Hinkley Center, for everything you have done for me, for my students, for the university, for the FDEP, and for the state of Florida.